Parts of St. John's, you'll see, for example, on the corner of North Jersey and Polk, you'll see South Jersey and Polk that's engraved in the sidewalk. What that meant was that was the south portion of St. John's when it was engraved. So that's an indicator that it was prior to St. John's being absorbed into Portland. And you can Google the names of some of these folks. It's usually the person, people would bid on the sidewalks and so forth. On the corners, they would consistently put what the company was and the date that the sidewalk was put in. And even as they redo those, they'll put when it was originally put in. If you can imagine, no, these were muddy streets, muddy sidewalks, and it's the way it was. People were tough and strong people. There are a variety of people as far as where people came from. James John himself was supposed to be Welsh, from Wales. You had Norwegians, Scandinavians. As you go up, like on the west side, Germantown Road, Kaiser Road, and so forth. So it was a mix of immigrants. And there was also what was the 1910 riot with the Hindus. That's a whole other subject in itself, because they were trying to blame the Hindus for taking away their jobs and so forth. As we head west on Lombard, there's two old buildings. They're both owned by Augie Calcano. Augie's father and his, I think, three uncles bought a whole bunch of, they were all Italian, they obviously, and then they built their property on Columbia Boulevard near the dump, and so he was in the real estate development. To this day, he owns those two buildings. I don't know how much more, but a lot. Let's see. So I think that's pretty much it here.
And those are the ones with the tunnels?
Correct. Thank you for bringing that up. So, what is the street coming up here? I always forget it, which one it is.
Are we able to get closer so I can see which buildings they are?
Yeah. I just had so much to cover, so I shut it down for a minute.
That's smart.
You can always do Portland maps, and it'll tell you the age of some of these buildings. So this is okay. So it is Chicago.
Okay. So which is his?
So this is, if you look up on the building, it'll say 1906. So I went into, I'm pulling the Baxters here for a minute because this is putting me across from the McChesney Hotel, and I know these guys anyway. Up there it says 1906. And so I was in the coffee shop there one day, Two Strokes Coffee Shop, and so I noticed the basement, and I think that's, and I said, can I go down your basement? And I said, yeah. And I was with Maria from the museum, and the gal says, the owner says of the bookstores, I'm not going to go down there. It's really scary. There's an entryway into the old Shanghai tunnels. I said, what? It's blocked off, she says. So I go down there, and I did videotape it, and
You did.
I did videotape the short tour that we went into the basement.
Yeah.
But the access, the archway, you can tell it was an entryway into the tunnel, was there. So that caused me to take truck. Bad timing on my part.
There's a parking spot right there.
Here?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So this is location here, 8926 North Lombard. So even though it changed to Jersey, the street numbers were the same when it was Jersey from Lombard. And again, see the brick buildings? They actually had a brick factory in St. John's, where Pier Park is today. So like Jowers, for example, those bricks came from the brick factory that was in Pier Park. And so made me curious. So then I went to Baxter's to get some parts, and the gentleman, Levi is his name, he works there, and I mentioned the tunnels to him. He said, oh yeah, I know about the tunnels. And he showed me the pictures of some of the tunnels on his phone. he manages what is referred to as the McChesney Hotel, which is also built in 1906. Dr. McChesney was a medical doctor in St. John's, and he ran his practice here. And he had his home on North Willamette Boulevard, which to this day, you can see above his garage is engraved Dr. McChesney. So he owned that.
What is it now?
I'm not sure what it's called, but it's still an apartment building, 20 units there. So I asked Levi, what do you know about these? And he says, yeah, I know all about them. He says, I'm the manager there, and there's definitely tunnels. He said there's 2 tunnels that go from McChesney Hotel across the street to Baxter's, and there's 2 tunnels that veer out to this building, 8926 North Lombard, also built in 1906. So then I continue my short, brief investigation, and so I go to the Wishing Well, again, which opened up in the about 1948, and by chance I asked the server, have you heard of the tunnels? Oh yes, he says, I know about the tunnels. I worked at Dad's, which was the old Central Hotel that was built in 1902. And he says, there's a tunnel that went from Dad's underneath to what is now Burgerville on the corner of North Ivanhoe and Philadelphia. And so I'm going, oh, that's interesting, you know. And, oh, there's the wrong one. Yeah. So I'm going, okay, that's interesting. So to this day, it's kind of a mystery. There's different theories on it. Terminal 4 was built in 1919. Shanghai was going on until as late as 1948. And so it's entirely possible, although the tunnel wouldn't directly connect it up with Terminal 4, that maybe they were Shanghaiing these folks in the basement. Another theory is alcohol prohibition started in Portland or Oregon in 1914, just 2 years after the women's right to vote. And so alcohol prohibition went on for a long, long time. Now, it's not going to stop people from drinking. That's why they have the speakeasy doors and so forth, and private clubs and everything. So one was it's possibly Shanghai, one alcohol, 2 possibility of red light kind of thing going on. It's hard to say because at this point there's not many. There isn't any old timers from that period around that would have known about it. Unless there were small children who heard the stories and so forth. So that's the recent discovery that we've had, or it may have just been for business but why would they go all the way under? Interesting. Let's see. So then we would continue to where Sitton School is today, Pier Park, that kind of thing, and then you've got also Cathedral Park, the history there with the Native Americans, and William Clark of the Lewis and Clark Exposition camping there. Large Native American population here that was wiped out over about a 20-year period to pretty much nothing. The Native Americans that still survived connected up with the other tribes towards the east, and there was one Native American that was still in the area. I forget his name right now. So you got this was a bustling community. You have people like T.J. Monahan and Killingsworth, and it was their focus to make St. John's like the hub, like the primary portion of this metropolitan area. It was where the Willamette and the Columbia come together, what was now Kelly Point Park. There was also a lighthouse there. And so they're advocating for stuff. T.J. Monahan is he's involved in the education aspect of it. He's involved in the libraries. He becomes an operator on the streetcars. He's a leader in the Odd Fellows. And it doesn't really take off. They later choose the core of downtown Portland as the hub because it would connect with the west side. But this area is still developing. In about 1904, Portland Woolen Mill burns down in Sellwood, Portland, the Sellwood area of Portland. And they decide to rebuild that in St. John's, Oregon, which it was St. John's, on North Baltimore, as you go down North Edison and North Baltimore towards Cathedral Park. Off to the right, you'll see some of what's still left of the Portland Woolen Mill. They employed between 500 and 600 people. They were union wage jobs, and generations would work there. It was open until from about 1904 or so until 1960. All those generations. Several of the employees were killed during World War II. I've got some of their names, but and so you've got woolen mills. Oh, by the way, that hill during the winter months, they would close it off because you would go down, it was frozen. When we were kids, we'd get on our sleds at the top of the hill, and we would literally go down 3 blocks, 3 blocks, all the way from North Edison on Baltimore, past what was old Portland Woolen Mill. We just call it Will Mill Hill, because somebody's in Will Mill. No, it's Woolen Mill. But anyway, all the way down to the railroad tracks that still exist, Cathedral Park. And then you have to walk back up again. But it was really cool, and I vividly remember, the snow kind of blasting my face, and that was a lot of fun. But back to the history of Portland Woolen Mill. So they were recognized by the U.S. military and the government because they would make blankets and military uniforms, wool uniforms, and they were just putting it out. We can show you the awards that they got because they were just making all these uniforms and blankets for them. And then it supplied jobs. And so when people were working, then they had money to do business with the community, with Jowers and with the other stores that existed in the community at the time. And so you had them. You also had the World War I. They were building ships on the Willamette near the St. John's Bridge. They were building those down there. You had there was a barrel factory here. That was a big thing. The barrel factory. The bricks in Pier Park. There were the longshoremen were here again. 1919. They were here. You had the different manufacturing places. Timber was a big thing. So you had the mills they were cutting the wood, and you had the loggers and so forth. But that was a big thing both on this side of the river and Linton as well. And so there was a tax base here and money for the businesses, and a lot of them were union. So much staunch union during different points that in the St. John's Review they would say this is a union store. Wayne Smith, who cut hair in St. John's from 1946 until he passed away just a couple of years ago in about 2018. He had cut 71 years. He cut hair here in St. John's, and on the front of his store there was a sticker that said Union Barbershop, even though he was the only employee. But that was an example. So this is part of the subculture of this area is proud, union, hard-working, blue-collar people that built this community, built this country, and continue to do it. You won't see any street signs named after them, but they are the unsung heroes. And so St. John's was a small city of its own, and it had that feel for some time because it's a peninsula. So we joke about it. We say it's the true Mayberry. Or if you talk to somebody long enough, you're going to make a connection. Like you, Genevieve, when you worked at was it Bank of America back then? You would connect with your generation, your dad's generation, mine, your Grandma Jones connection. I think back then you may even connected with Grandma Nana's generation. So 4 generations. And again, if you talk to somebody long enough, you make that connection. So fortunately, people have documented this. They took pictures and they wrote their family stories. I'm the president of the St. John's Heritage Association, which started actually maybe unofficially in the mid-60s. Some local boys like Howard Galbraith, class of 1930 at Roosevelt, get together for coffee and let's get organized. What do you say we record this history? And they did. And I'm glad that they did. We have 4 books, and you can also access those online at stjohnsheritage.org. And we also have the hard copies. So there's always more to explore. again, the Native American, that was, Native Americans were near the St. John. By the way, as you go down to Cathedral Park, we can go down there, but that's where the Native Americans were, and there's one of the stories I was reading recently. These, when they were kids, they would go down when they get bored. They would go down and hunt for the arrowheads. Because the Native Americans have been there for centuries, so arrowheads all over the place. And then the old timers would talk about seeing the Native Americans near the St. John's, which is now where the St. John's Bridge is, where Baltimore dead ends in the river, or all the way in the Trumbull Fort area, Rivergate. And this was ideal here because it was moderate temperatures, it wasn't cold, and you had the access to all the fish in the river. You had all the wildlife, you had deer. So the meat, that was an ideal place to be. Okay, I'll take a break here and take a zip.